Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Top Gun, Phoenix, by Michael Anderle, narrated by Eva Wilhelm. Chapter 1. Mia tossed a salute to the commander strolling down the hallway. She felt awkward. The gesture was crisp and precise because she'd received military protocol training during her time in the Tulare Academy prep program, so it wasn't that. Even the rarity of uniformed active duty officers outside of major evaluations wasn't the problem. She looked over her shoulder as the commander strolled away, uninterested in the new pilot officer. The real source of her unease was the harsh prison she'd been in for a month and the dangerous, violent instincts heightened during her stay. On the surface, a military installation resembled a prison in that they both involved people living under heavy restrictions and rules, and their movements and behaviors were carefully controlled. Both places involved people whose lives were saturated in past violence and the anticipation of future conflict. The key difference was in the purpose and direction of the violence. Discipline controlled the soldier, pilot, and Marine. Their uniforms marked them as part of a greater collective. Their violence served the greater good, unlike the thuggish and selfish factions of Black Ice who cared only about survival. Mia's time in Black Ice had drawn on her instincts and tactical training, emphasizing situational awareness and personal survival over such niceties as manner and protocol. She had become a prisoner and achieved short-term survival at the cost of long-term discipline. That wasn't something she could wash away after a few weeks. She slowed, looking over her uniform. Being an officer in the K-Cap Navy meant more than being good at killing people. For all her skills and abilities, her social weaknesses could slow her advancement and handicap her ability to dig into the conspiracy behind her father's death and the Cadmus Agrotis program she'd uncovered in the decrypted files. Everything had changed on Black Ice. Mia understood now who she was and where she came from. Beyond her past, the most fundamental cells in her body had been altered by Dr. Icarus' work. It was as if she'd been reborn. She had changed. That didn't mean the mission had changed. Her father deserved justice, and the K-Cap owed Mia the complete truth. Her discoveries pointed to something far deeper and more disturbing than she'd expected. The awakening of her power didn't give her pause. Her new abilities were strong tools that would help her complete her mission. She became aware of a faint odor, harsh, acrid notes that ripped her out of her introspection. Floral scents attacked her next, combining into a garden of overwhelming smells. A loud plop resonated in her ears, and an eternity stretched out before another. Something was dripping 2 rooms down on the left of the hallway. Specks of dust danced in front of her, and her mind reduced the complex movement to easy-to-anticipate trajectories. Mia sucked in a breath and braced herself against the wall. She shook her head to force herself back to normal. Experimenting with her enhanced senses and mental processing had helped her control it better, though it also led to the occasional spontaneous activation. She couldn't risk that, not in a military environment where everyone was trained to focus on attention to detail. Elements in the government knew about her change. They had to. Somebody had been funding and staffing the facility on Black Ice, but her successful escape into the Top Gun program proved that if she kept a low profile, she could still complete her mission. Time returned to normal, and the chemical and perfumes assaulting her faded into barely there sensations that were easy to ignore. Even beyond her enhanced focus state, her baseline senses remained enhanced. Learning to deal with that in a place of constant distractions was proving complicated. Everything was easier when all she had to worry about was the quiet of staying with Abigail or the barren penal colony wasteland and her one ally on ice. It was more proof of something her father had taught her long ago. All weapons have their advantages and disadvantages. Learn to master both, and you'll have victory. Mia jogged down the hallway. She needed to get back to her room and clear her head before someone saw her acting strangely. She'd worked too hard to be thrown out of the program now. It was almost a miracle she hadn't lost her opportunity because of her imprisonment. TOPGUN demanded focus. She couldn't let her incarceration in Black Ice or the changes there derail her participation in the program. She'd earned her slot in the K-Cap Navy, and she would continue to use that to uncover what had happened to her father. Learning that he was genetically engineered wasn't enough. She had so many questions about what they'd had him doing and how he'd died. Given what she was capable of, her father must have been 10 times as deadly. Mia's mind drifted through everything she'd learned on ice as her body operated on autopilot until she was in front of her barracks room. She reached to open the door but let her hand drop. Her time in Black Ice had left its mark mentally, physically, and spiritually, but she kept pushing away the most shocking truth, the one she'd learned not on ice but upon her return. That truth was the reason she'd left her datapad in her room during her last errand. Holding her breath, Mia opened her door and stepped over to her desk. Her datapad waited for her with the expected message. 2 new messages received. Sender, Curie, Abigail. Sighing, Mia swiped to delete the messages. Without fail, every single day, several times a day, Abigail sent messages. And every day, without fail, Mia erased the messages without reviewing them. She wasn't ready to deal with Abigail. No, she wasn't ready to deal with her mother. Mia sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her blank wall. Slowing her breath, she did her best not to focus on anything but her breathing. She didn't want the thoughts of betrayal to come, and worse, the confusion that followed them. The facts were straightforward. Abigail was her mother. There'd been a disagreement, and Mia's father had left Abigail and taken the artificial gestation used to grow and birth Mia. With that truth burned into Mia's soul, everything about Abigail's behavior made perfect sense in hindsight, especially since the relationship with Mia's father was long over. The truth explained why the woman had been so quick to help Mia's mission despite the dangers involved. Mia narrowed her eyes at the datapad. Her own cowardice annoyed her as much as Abigail's behavior. In all their time together, she could have pressed farther, but she hadn't. On some level, she might have been afraid of knowing the truth. What didn't make sense is why Abigail hadn't told Mia the truth before letting it slip out accidentally. Overhearing it during Abigail's drunken ramblings had bowled Mia over. "It's irrational," Mia whispered, "and stupid not to contact her. If I talked to her, I could at least tell her to stop the constant barrage of pointless and distracting messages." She shook her head. Talking would mean she'd have to subject herself to Abigail's emotional pleas while she was still unstable. It would be another blow to Mia's focus and a risk to the mission. Mia didn't know what would happen if she talked to Abigail. The conversation wouldn't be a mission she could solve with a clever infiltration and assault strategy. The problem was that whenever she gamed out the conversation, it always ended in one of 2 places. Either placating an emotionally wrecked woman with a promise they'd work it out, or crushing Abigail for lying to her. Mia had TOPGUN now. She needed to move into the next phase of both her life and investigating her father. There wasn't the time to get pulled down by sentimentality and emotion. Mia wasn't sure she could trust Abigail anymore. Not telling Mia she was her mother felt more like self-preservation than helping a wayward daughter. A light knock sent Mia to her feet and lifting her fists, her heart kicked up. She exhaled slowly and dropped her hands as warmth spread in her cheeks. She didn't need to respond to every startling incident by readying for battle. The barracks weren't the Gen Pop common area of Black Ice. Everybody on base wasn't waiting for their chance to ambush her. "Come in," she called. "It's open." The door opened and Karen stepped inside. The fit of her uniform and her curly red hair tied into a tight bun suited her perfectly, like she'd been meant to wear that uniform her entire life. They'd all worn uniforms for the academy training, but this was different. When Mia looked in the mirror, she didn't feel the same, but she wasn't sure how much of that was needing to deprogram from her prison experience. Karen closed the door. She glanced around the room with a pained look. I know you haven't been here that long, but you're technically a commissioned officer now, and this is your assigned living quarters. Mia shrugged. Yes? Karen shrugged back. You are allowed to decorate it. When you leave it like this, it feels like you're planning to leave again soon. Decoration is unnecessary, Mia replied. Explaining how she'd barely decorated the room she'd grown up in would bring questions she wasn't ready to answer, even before admitting she was the child of a genetically engineered super soldier. And we will be leaving soon. Karen rolled her eyes. How did I know you'd say that? She frowned. Wait, I'm not interrupting your power nap, am I? Or stasis nap? No. Mia shook her head. I wasn't in the middle of a stasis recovery coma. Karen grimaced. Do you really have to call it a coma? It's closer to a coma than a nap. Being imprecise isn't helpful to me or you. Mia tapped the side of her head. We should always mentally reinforce the truth. That means we'll react quicker and more appropriately when and if an incident occurs. It's your body. You know best. Karen looked away. And thanks again for telling me about that. I know Ryoko and Paul feel the same way. We're honored that you'd trust us with such a big secret. I know how hard that was for you. I needed someone I could trust. But you don't trust us enough to tell us more than something happened on ice, Karen replied quietly. She pleaded with her eyes. You just got done lecturing me on being precise. We could help you more if we knew everything going on. You're helping me enough as is. Mia stared at Karen. She hadn't lied to any of her friends. She'd left out information. Maybe that made her no different from Abigail. For now, Ryoko, Karen, and Paul would be safest if they didn't know the whole truth about what Mia was and what she'd become. It was the harsh necessity of needing trustworthy people to cover for her when she couldn't target the stasis comas for the beginning of her normal cycle that had forced her to tell them. And I'll tell you someday, Mia promised. When the time is right, and I'm sure it won't hurt you. We're your friends, Karen pressed. And more than that, we're serving together in the K-Cap Navy. You don't have to hold the entire galaxy on your shoulders. I'm not. Mia shook her head. And don't worry, this is more personal than anything. That's one of the reasons I don't want to get you more involved than you need to be. That was the closest Mia had edged to a lie. Her mission was motivated by personal concerns, but the people behind her father's creation were deeply embedded into the power structures of the K-Cap, both civilian and military. She couldn't ignore that the more she pushed, the more she might push something dark and dangerous into the light for everyone to see. A leaden silence stretched out between the two. Mia would never fault her friend for caring, inconvenient as it could be at times. Karen glanced at the datapad. Speaking of personal stuff, did Abigail contact you again? How did you know? Mia asked, double-checking that there wasn't a new message on the pad. I didn't, but she's been sending you tons of messages, and I've been here plenty of times when you've deleted them. Karen sauntered to the bed and sat beside Mia, patting her on the shoulder. I don't know that much about what went down between you and her before you came here, but I do know that nothing good comes of avoiding talking about problems with people you care about. Trust me, running away never helps. You don't Mia stopped and shook her head. I'll fix it when the time is right. And this is important. She didn't tell me something I deserved to know. And you're mad at her because of it? I don't know. I'm confused. I think. Mia shrugged. That makes sense, Karen allowed. But she might have been trying to protect you. She smiled. Like you're trying to protect us by not telling us everything that happened on ice. Mia frowned. It's not the same thing at all. Sure. Karen waved a hand. Just make sure when you say you'll talk when the time is right, you're talking about the time being right for everybody and not just you. She hopped up. Oh, I got distracted. I came here to tell you that the rumor wasn't just a rumor. The rumor about them moving up the start of the TOPGUN program? Mia asked. Karen nodded. I heard it straight from the commander earlier. It'd be nice to not sit around here doing nothing, Mia mused. Yes, it will, but make sure you get your head screwed on straight. Karen winked. You might be special, but you're only human. Mia scoffed. Yes, only human. You coming to dinner with us tonight? Karen moved toward the door. I know you have a lot on your mind, but the best thing to do sometimes is forget your troubles and spend time with your friends. I'll try, Mia answered. Good. You need to do something other than brood in your room. Mia started to make a joke about smashing in someone's face. Now she wasn't sure how much of it was a joke after black ice. Instead, she raised her hand in a wave to Karen. Karen waved back and stepped out of the room, closing the door behind her. Mia grabbed her datapad. Debbie 2, you there? I'm here, answered a voice from the datapad. This branch of the AI kept much of the same personality of the main Debbie, down to an English accent, though far less posh. The original idea was to have a portable splinter AI that could help Mia without risk of being tracked back to Abigail. Debbie 2 was separate from the main Debbie's entity, meaning Mia could confide in it without Abigail learning anything, though it also meant the splinter AI lacked access to the processing and database power of its parent. It had been a short talk the night before Abigail had gotten drunk. Mia had barely paid attention, not thinking that Debbie 2 would become something far more important than either of them had known. She'd assumed she'd have plenty of time to discuss the new AI with Abigail. Do you think I should answer her? Mia asked. Are you talking about Dr. Curie, love? Asked Debbie 2. Yes. A successful heart-to-heart discussion will improve your morale, suggested Debbie 2. You could clarify points of concern that are now limiting your ability to perform at your best. And what are the chances of that being successful? Debbie 2 paused for an uncomfortably long time. I lack the necessary data to process your query through an appropriate model. I could prepare a questionnaire that might help form the baseline for the model, though without Dr. Curie also filling out a similar questionnaire, it'll be difficult to generate an accurate model. We'll skip the questionnaire, Mia scoffed. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. What about everything else I asked you to look at, including tracking down names from the decrypted files? She asked. Networking with the main Deborah program would vastly improve my ability to examine and access the necessary databases and servers, noted Debbie 2. I would estimate I'm currently operating at less than 10% efficiency without access to those resources. I can't allow that. It's too dangerous. Mia shook her head. I need to control my future, and that includes not having everything go to Abigail. Mia was lucky Abigail had programmed Debbie 2 to obey Mia without question. Then I will reiterate what I said this morning, Debbie 2 replied. I'm still working on gaining access to multiple target systems. Given the nature of the program, any estimates of completion time would be untrustworthy, love. In your own words, stealth and caution are necessary to avoid your enemies. Although I've made significant progress in several databases, pushing too hard may lead to detection. Do what you need to without alerting anyone. Mia glanced at the time. As for me, I need to get ready for PT. Mia pulled several meters ahead of the rest of the pack following her. She slowed gradually, not wanting to make it too obvious she was matching their pace. The sweat pouring down their reddened faces revealed how much effort the leaders had been putting in to try to catch up with her during the physical training run. She'd gotten sloppy about concealing her abilities because of black ice. Her time in the Tulare Academy program had impressed on her the need to show her true abilities sparingly. Standing out in the TOPGUN program for her piloting skills was a good thing. Standing out too much for her physical abilities might get her targeted by the same forces that had directed her to black ice to begin with. Mia's pride wouldn't allow her to fall into second place, though. She adjusted her breathing and stayed right in front of the main pack, speeding up whenever another member of her new unit tried to pass her. Her friends stayed solidly in the center of the pack. They'd seen enough of Mia to know it was pointless to try to keep up with her, and that she wouldn't slow down just to run beside them. Mia didn't feel any guilt. PT was about training their bodies. Just because they were pilots and not infantry didn't mean they could neglect their fitness. Her friends needed to challenge their limits. A man running beside her gave her a dirty look. Although the unit was doing PT together, they hadn't had a formal briefing yet for the entire program. Most people knew who she was because of the flaring incident, but other than a handful of names, she didn't know much about the other pilots. She also didn't care. She wasn't eager to meet the competition and act like they weren't rivals. Their inability to beat her at running didn't prove anything one way or another. She'd get their measure soon enough. Mia looked past the man. Someone had been watching her. Someone other than the other PT participants. She couldn't articulate the exact sensory stimulus telling her that, but she was learning to trust her new senses, even without hyperfocus mode. A tingle ran through her body. She kept up her run, ignoring the sensation. Whoever it was, they weren't going to come after her in a crowd of TOPGUN pilots. After a long shower, Mia toweled off and redonned her uniform. She'd walked slowly back to her barracks room, half expecting trouble, but no one paid her much attention. Halfway there, she gave up and quickened her pace. "A new message has arrived from Dr. Curie, love," Debbie 2 announced after Mia closed the door. "I thought you should be aware of that." "Delete it," Mia ordered. "You might look it over before—" "Delete it." "Very well," Debbie 2 answered, with, Mia could swear, a touch of sass in her voice. "There is something else you should see. I successfully penetrated one of the target databases during your physical training session and finished cross-referencing the contents with other collated data of interest." Mia picked up her datapad to see a long list of names, with one highlighted. Thomas Rainier. She stared at the name. It sounded familiar. "Wait, Thomas Rainier? As in Commander Thomas Rainier?" Mia asked. She hadn't bothered to learn all the new program members, but she'd skimmed the names of instructors. "What's the meaning of this?" "Based on the information from the files you recovered and the internal coding, it's almost certain that Commander Rainier is another super soldier from the same batch as your father," explained Debbie 2. "Given this newfound information, I would strongly suggest you review the messages sent from Abigail." "Why? And I can't anyway. You deleted them." "Yes, but they aren't permanently deleted. You instructed me to delete them, but not to purge the secondary storage reserved for deleted messages. Given their brevity and the modest amount of time that has passed, they are all still recoverable." Mia frowned, annoyed that the AI was subverting her will. "And you've read them?" "It's impossible for the message to pass through this datapad without at least partial processing by me. However, my primary directive is to follow and satisfy your orders. I'd be chuffed if you reviewed the messages because I think it'd be useful for you. I didn't press in the past because you were adamant about refusing to read them. The situation has now advanced to the point that I would be wrong to not insist upon you reading them." "Fine, show me the latest message." Mia held her breath, expecting a poignant emotional message from Abigail. She didn't understand why the AI cared so much. "Mia, be careful. Someone is looking into what we recovered. Debbie has found odd traces in her searches." Mia brought up another message. It wasn't phrased the same, but the sentiment was similar. None of the messages concerned their true relationship or Mia's abrupt departure. She looked through several more related messages until hard footfalls sounded from down the hallway. A group of people was running toward her room. She set the datapad down and opened the door, peeking down the hallway. A group of large MPs came toward her room, pain batons and knives hanging from their belts. Though they slowed, their heavy breathing and drips of sweat proved they'd been pushing hard. The men slowed, eyeing her warily. They spread out across the hallway until arriving at her room. A pair of MPs walked to the other side to block off escape in the opposite direction. Other nearby doors opened, and people peeked through to see what was happening. Mia sniffed the air. Hints of adrenaline and testosterone filtered through, along with other spices of violence. Her gaze flicked between the faces of the men. They weren't doing a good job of hiding their narrowed eyes and bared teeth. These weren't men there to have a pleasant conversation over tea. "Varric, you need to come with us," an MP demanded. "Technically, that's Lieutenant Varric now," Mia replied. "But I'll let the protocol lapse slide if you can explain what this is about." "You will come with us right now," the MP repeated, pulling a pain baton from his belt, "or we'll be forced to bring you into custody using force." "On what charge?" Mia asked. "And why so many of you?" The other MPs drew their batons. One man growled. Nothing about this made sense. Mia had first-hand experience pissing off the K-Cap Navy. Her superior officer would have called her in for an ass-chewing with security on standby if worried. Sending men to her room in the barracks didn't feel right. "I have the right to know why you're bringing me in," Mia demanded. "You brought this on yourself, bitch!" The MP gestured to two other men. "Grab her!" "I'm sure as hell not going with you." Mia jumped back and brought up her fists. "And I don't recognize you. This is your last chance to walk away before you get hurt." He sneered. "We tried to be nice. Now it's time to do this the hard way." Chapter 2. Growling like a rabid animal, an MP lunged for Mia. She grabbed his wrist and bent it back until she heard a loud and satisfying pop. He grimaced but didn't slow, and he swung for her head with his other hand. She ducked the blow and shoved him back, impressed he could keep his combat cool after she'd broken his wrist. He hadn't even screamed in pain. She couldn't underestimate her opponents. Another man spread his arms, planning to use his size and grip to restrain her. Now they were the ones underestimating her. Mia spun into a kick to his chest. The powerful blow knocked him back, but not down. The pack hesitated, exchanging glances while still ensuring they surrounded Mia. Their deployment ensured that despite the wide hallway, she couldn't run in any direction without being within arm's length of an opponent. Her brief respite allowed her to study them more closely. They had size on her, but unless they were super soldiers, they didn't have her speed. She could compensate for an absolute strength difference by maximizing her muscle usage through her hyperfocus, but she didn't want to risk that unless necessary. The one hadn't let a broken wrist end the fight, and their stances and formation further marked them as professionals. They weren't relying on obvious verbal commands, suggesting they had training and combat experience together. Mia needed to finish this quickly. Her lifelong training and abilities gave her the edge, but one surprise weapon could end with her bleeding out at the mercy of the false MPs. For all she knew, they'd been sent to retrieve her and bring her back to the lab for more experiments. Retrieving the information from the lab on ice had confirmed that she had powerful enemies embedded in the government, and if they hadn't known about her before, her stunt on the prison planet guaranteed they did now. Mia kept up her guard and widened her stance but didn't make a move. Though she didn't believe these men were MPs, she wouldn't deny their solid discipline. Common thugs broke and ran after a serious injury. Their formations fell apart just as easily. A bloodied nose could send a thug running away when he realized he'd picked a fight with a wolf instead of a puppy. Her first victim glanced at his bruised, limp wrist. His eyes promised vengeance for the injury, which annoyed Mia. She should have taken him out with her first attack. Superior numbers gave her enemies another advantage, but despite their discipline, that wouldn't be enough to overcome the daughter of a super soldier. They hadn't gone for their weapons, and she suspected they had orders not to hurt her too much. Unfortunately for them, she didn't feel the same. Without any knowledge of who sent them and where they intended to take her, she assumed it would end in pain and suffering, if not her death. Her mission to uncover the truth about her father would end. She wouldn't allow that to happen, no matter how many men she needed to kill. "Leave while you can," Mia suggested. "It will only get more painful from here." Glaring at her, the MP leader threw a punch. She sidestepped the blow and pivoted around him to smash an elbow into the back of his head, and he grunted and dropped to his hands and knees. It was time to stop playing around and even the odds. Mia slammed her foot into his stomach. He vomited and crashed onto his back. She stomped his face, smacking his head against the floor with a loud thud. A crunch accompanied her next stomp. The swift and brutal nature of the attack had given the rest of the attackers pause. One man swallowed, and the anger in his eyes turned to uncertainty. They finally understood who they were dealing with. Mia jumped back. "I don't know who you really are, but I know the most important thing. You won't win. You can't win. Whatever this is, stop now. Keep this going, and I can't guarantee your survival." I have no reason to expect to live through this, and I will, therefore, rip your heads off if that is...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?